Hi, we are less than 3 weeks out now from election day, and I've been following the race very closely. In terms of the result, who the likely winner is going to be, I don't have any particularly hot takes in this respect. I think my thinking is probably broadly in line with the mainstream. I think Biden is likely to win. He is certainly well ahead at the moment. Trump is not out of the running by any means. He is an underdog with a puncher's chance, as he was in 2016, probably with a worse chance than he did in 2016 because the polling is a lot more difficult for him, and some of the demographic and coalition factors are running against him in ways that they weren't 4 years ago, and that gets into the meat of what I actually am interested in talking about, which is the coalitions that Biden is trying to knit together to get into the White House, and what that can mean for the Democratic Party and for American politics. Biden is currently a little over 10 points ahead, according to 538's polling average tracker, and there's been a lot of polls that have come out over the last week or so from The Guardian and the Wall Street Journal and CNN that have Biden 14, 15, 16, even 17 points ahead. I think all of us are far too kind of traumatized by 2016 to really take too much comfort in that. I think if Biden were 30 points ahead in the polls, I think we'd find a way to be sort of still nervous and hesitant about it. But there are some interesting demographic things going on underneath just the national polling average that I think puts a Biden landslide into play. Now, you never call these things in politics, or at least very rarely do you call them, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to look very foolish, and the history of political commentary is littered with such examples. But a Biden landslide is in play. And it's not just because of the opinion polling. Obviously, the opinion polling is very, very positive for him. But there's more to it than that. It's about the coalition that he's trying to build and the groups he's trying to win over. Obviously, Biden is trying to appeal to the so-called Obama-Trump voters who voted for Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012 and switched their vote to Trump in 2016. These are the voters that Biden is obviously trying to win back. Winning them back is key, but there's more to it than that. A very interesting trend that has been pointed out, particularly in Florida, which is the granddaddy of them all as far as the big swing states go, is the shift among seniors away from the president and towards Joe Biden. Obviously, we won't know how that's going to turn out until election day and we actually count the votes, but certainly, Trump was powered to a quite narrow victory over Hillary Clinton in 2016 in Florida by running up the score among senior voters, winning them by 17 points. If Biden could cut that lead, he doesn't even need to win seniors, but if he could cut that lead down into the single digits even, I think that probably flips Florida blue. Another demographic is veterans, who are traditionally associated with the Republican Party, fairly or not. You can make that judgment on your own, but certainly there has been some encouraging polling for Joe Biden there. And the list goes on. The demographic that the Democrats are trying hardest perhaps to win are those fabled suburban women, and particularly suburban mothers who would have been inclined to vote for the GOP up until 2016, but who gave their vote to the Democrats in the midterms of 2018, and who the Democrats are hoping to win this time around as well. In the ideal Democratic scenario, Biden wins over all these respective groups. That powers him not just to victory, but to a massive victory in the Electoral College, as well as returning the Senate majority to the Democratic Party for the first time since 2014, and giving the Democrats unified control of the US federal government, paving the way for some really quite transformative legislation, things like adding the District of Columbia and possibly Puerto Rico as well to the Union, probably passing a massive program of voting laws and voter protections, things like obviously climate change legislation that an increasingly divided Democratic Party largely agrees on, whether or not you support the Green New Deal, such as it is, or not. The Democratic Party is largely unified around the need to pass climate legislation. This puts the Democratic Party in a very interesting position because it's going into this election as essentially the party of both socialists and conservatives. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean, because you think the Republican Party is the conservative party, and historically that has been true, but you know, any genuine conservatives watching this at the moment don't need me to tell them that there is nothing remotely conservative about Donald Trump or his presidency. Not in an economic sense, and certainly not in a social sense. Conservatives who prioritize things like the rule of law and respect for societal institutions. These are things that the president has not only eschewed, but actively kind of attacked and undermined. And there are a great many conservatives who will vote for Biden this election, not because they like his policies, but simply because there's really nowhere else for them to go. Unless, and there won't be unless the Republican Party manages to undo Trumpism and sort of return to being the kind of Bush-Reagan-esque conservative party that it was. So the Democratic Party is having to juggle seniors, it's having to juggle young voters, it's juggling socialists and conservatives, it's juggling veterans and anti-war sorts. No political party in the world can hold a coalition like that together for long. The ideal scenario for the Democratic Party is that it holds together long enough to give them victory on election day, perhaps by a convincing margin. But what happens afterwards is going to affect the internal conflict that's been going on in the Democratic Party really since, well, before 2016, but 2016 is really when it became crystallized in the race for the nomination between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And obviously that disagreement has been amplified over the last 4 years. Is the Democratic Party going to remain a kind of Clinton-Obama kind of center-left, generally market-friendly political party, or is it going to adopt the more kind of European social democrat model that people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are trying to pursue? This is what I think makes the 2024 presidential election actually as interesting as this one, perhaps more so, because the Democratic Party is going through now what the Republican Party went through over the course of Obama's presidency, when it transmogrified from the kind of center-right, compassionate, conservative, philosophy of Bush, the two Bush presidencies and the Reagan administration. And over the course of the Obama presidency, with the rise of the Tea Party, and obviously the rise of Trump after that, it has become a, snarling kind of bubbling, frothing bath of xenophobia and nationalism, and really quite, even at the most extreme fringes, white supremacist elements have come into it, even fascistic elements. Nobody can say that the president doesn't have fascist tendencies, at a minimum. It is not a Republican Party that somebody like Reagan would recognize were he alive today. That's what the Republican Party has become. And the Democratic Party is having that argument with itself. Now, I'm not comparing the Bernie and Warren wing of the party to the Michelle Bachmann, Sarah Palin, Donald Trump wing of the GOP. I'm not doing that for a moment. But there is a similar kind of row going on now in the Democratic Party as to what kind of party are we going to be. Using the GOP's kind of internal squabble as a marker, we are halfway through that argument. Because, halfway through Obama's presidency, the row was still going on. We got Mitt Romney, who was the Republican nominee. Obviously, Romney lost. And, you know, that kind of internal row continued, and eventually the Tea Party side kind of won out, although they're not called the Tea Party anymore. They're just called the Republican Party now, because the two are largely indistinguishable from one another. And Trump was very much the apotheosis of the Tea Party movement. Ultimately, the Tea Party side won out, and that's why there are very few moderate Republicans left. Certainly very few in Congress. The most, you know, prominent kind of moderate Republicans are governors, people like John Kasich, or currently serving governors like Charlie Baker in Massachusetts, or Larry Hogan in Maryland. But in Congress, the moderate Republicans are becoming rapidly extinct, and that is a trend that is continuing. I think, you know, Sarah Collins is looking very likely to lose her seat in Maine. Is it Sarah Collins? Anyway, it doesn't matter. You all know who I'm talking about. Is looking likely, or at the very least, it's possible, will lose her seat in Maine this cycle, and that'll be another moderate Republican gone from Susan Collins. That's who it is. Another moderate Republican gone from Congress, assuming she does lose that race. It's too early to say. So that's where the Republican Party is now. Where will the Democratic Party be in 4 years? And we're still trying to figure that out. Certainly, the coalition that Biden is trying to knit together, if it holds, it won't hold, I don't think, until 2024. By then, there will be a Republican nominee. If it is a Biden landslide, that might be enough to sort of expunge the Republican Party of Trumpism, and we may get a more kind of Republican nominee, like somebody like Larry Hogan, who has supposedly been eyeing up a run for the White House in 24. We will perhaps by then have a better idea of, you know, what direction the Democratic Party is going to go in, particularly as kind of the younger lights. I mean, one thing that stood out to me is the average age of the Democratic nominees, or the candidates to be the Democratic nominee, and that's, you know, age is no bad thing, not at all, but we are going to see kind of younger talents coming through now on both sides of the party. We're seeing, obviously, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the shining light for kind of the more socialist wing of the Democratic Party. On the other sort of wing of the party, we have Pete Buttigieg, who obviously his campaign launched him to stardom. So we're going to see these kind of younger talents coming through, and they're both very talented figures, AOC and Pete Buttigieg. And I think watching that kind of debate play out, I mean, you know, personally, can you imagine, like, if we have Pete and an AOC running for the nomination to be the Democratic nominee down the line sometime? I mean, the debates between those two would be an absolutely mouth-watering prospect for someone like me, just purely from a, you know, as a lover of politics, independent of who I actually sort of want to be the nominee. That's how I kind of see it. That's one potential way that I see it playing out. Obviously, if Trump is re-elected, then I think the socialist wing of the Democratic Party is going to win out. Because the Democratic Party, I think, because it'll push the Democratic Party further left in the same way it pushed losing in 2012 pushed the Republican Party further right. If Biden wins the White House in a few weeks' time, then I think it's a more interesting and a more open question as to what the kind of who wins out in that kind of internal disagreement the Democratic Party is having at the moment. So yeah, we're a couple of weeks out from the election. If anybody in America has managed to come across this, then please do go out and vote. You know, no matter who it's for. And you know, on behalf of the rest of the world, if you could just kick Trump out in a couple of weeks, that'd just be great. But up to you guys. In any case, we'll see how it goes, and I'm probably going to start making some more of these. But in the meantime, if you like this, then maybe consider giving it a like. I'd be very grateful. Leave a comment. I will absolutely reply. Yeah, 3 weeks to go. Let's see what happens. Stay centered, everybody.